Well, Mark Martin is the former Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. He's now the Dean of Regent University Law School. And Your Honor, it's good to have you with us again. God bless you.
Great to be with you, Pat. Thank you.
What constitutes obstruction of justice? What is it?
Well, for our purposes, there are three elements.
All right.
First, there has to be an obstructive act.
All right.
Second, there has to be a nexus between that obstructive act and an official proceeding. And third, there must be corrupt or criminal intent.
All right. So you've got to have an act and a criminal intent to. So the fact that a president, for example, is asking one of his subordinates to take it easy on a particular case, that's not obstruction of justice.
No, it is not. Imagine the most challenging day of your life in a family.
All right.
And instead of family members talking about it and thinking about a range of options and then making an informed decision, that all of the intimate details of that family decision are aired for everybody to see. And that is essentially what's happened here. And that's why in this country, we've had the doctrine of executive privilege. And that means that the confidential communications between a president and his or her closest associates, the cabinet and staff, are shielded from dissemination, from being disclosed, so that a president can talk about all the options with his closest aides and then make a decision. So I'll give you an example from the Mueller report.
All right.
The allegation that the president improperly tried to terminate the special counsel. So he did have executive communications with his attorney, but ultimately no action was taken outside that zone of communication. So there is absolutely no obstructive act and no basis for charge.
How could Mueller come up and say, well, we haven't cleared the president? You don't clear somebody because you're presumed innocent, aren't you, until you're proven guilty?
Absolutely. And keep in mind that unlike the independent counsel law, we now have the internal regulation for the special counsel. That's why the special counsel gave the pros and cons of the evidence on obstruction for each of the scenarios, 10 in number. However, the final decision rests with the Department of Justice, and that's exactly what happened here. The very official that authorized the Mueller investigation, Rod Rosenstein, also determined that there was absolutely no obstruction. So there was no collusion and no obstruction.
Well, why are the Democrats acting like some terrible things happened? You heard Kamala Harris just a few minutes ago saying, well, he clearly obstructed justice. Not true?
Not true, right out of the Watergate playbook. And unfortunately, partisanship has become excessive in our country instead of what's good for the country and good for the American people.
Well, what about the tax returns, for example? You know, does Congress have the right to pick and choose to take one person's tax returns and examine them and make them public? Is that legitimate?
Well, if that is so, I think every American has a lot to fear, because if a branch of the federal government can just decide that they want to publicly illuminate any of our tax returns, we no longer have any legitimate right of privacy.
Well, what should Trump's attorneys do in relation to this? I mean, Congress is trying to subpoena actually force Mnuchin at the Treasury Department to give over those tax returns. And of course, his aides said it's so complicated that Congress wouldn't be able to understand them anyhow. But what do you do? The president says, well, it's under audit, I can't do it. But can he be forced to? And if he should, you know, what is the legitimate cause that Congress has?
Well, obviously there are a lot of customs at play here, a lot of traditions about release of tax returns. But at the end of the day, whenever you've been as successful in the business world as Donald Trump, remember, he was known to America as an incredibly successful businessman. And that is why America elected him, hoping that the same success he had had in business could be transferred to the government.
Right.
So if you were someone who wanted to see Donald Trump fail, you know that a worldwide enterprise as complex as Donald Trump's empire would have something to criticize. And so that is why they want these tax returns out into the public.
What do you think, just as an observer of this country? I mean, you know, the Bible says a house divided can't stand, and a kingdom divided against itself. You know, doesn't this concern you? Is there anything that the people can do to stop all this partisanship?
Well, I think let's go back to our justice system.
Yeah.
It was founded on the principle that it was a search for truth. And that is where we've gone astray. There has become so much of a jockeying to win the election at all cost that we've forgotten about truth. So when I think about the challenge before the American people, it really is time for us to pull together again and get our eye back on the things that matter.
That's right.
Education that works for our children, economic development and jobs for our people, allowing America to stand tall again. You know, let's remember that with all the Mueller report, it's been documented all the ways that Russia tried to influence our election, all the ways that Russia tried to destabilize America. Russia should be what we're looking at and figuring out how to deal with, not looking back at a presidential election that has at this point almost become a distant memory as all the candidates are jockeying for the next round.
Well, one last question. You're now the dean of the Regent University Law School. How's the law school coming?
It is going terrific. If I was a young person right now and wanted to come to a law school where I know I would have a great chance of getting a job and passing the bar, Regent Law School needs to be #1 on the list.
Well, we'll take that endorsement. Thank you so much for being with us. Come back.